Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Richard, and welcome back to the Stock Market Outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. As always, we're going to run through the major indexes, talk about the current market conditions, and also cover some key stocks that I'm watching pretty closely and could give a tell about where the market's going to go. So with that said, let's start off with the NASDAQ composite on a daily chart here. And you can see the big reversal we had here on this Thursday when obviously the CPI numbers came out. We had a very large gap down, but then a strong recovery. And then the very next day, we had another reversal, obviously this time to the downside, where we gave back a lot of that progress. However, it is key to note that we have not broken this significant low. So as of right now, there is a rally attempt in progress, and we're on day 2 of that. So we could get a fall through day signal for those CanSlim traders out there sometime next week. Keep in mind that there have been previous fall through days during this downtrend that have not ended up working, but it is something to keep in mind. And also along with that fall through day, obviously there's the index component. Ross calls this the quantitative aspect of it, but there's also the qualitative aspect of a fall through day, which is the health and breadth of market leadership, which at this moment is pretty darn poor. The solar stocks have taken a hit. Basically, there's some biotech names that are acting well, but are pretty small. If you bring up stocks like Acro, these have been running pretty well, but it's not quite enough to support a widespread rally. And going back to the NASDAQ here, we're really going to need 3 to 4 of those promising growth groups to act well to really support a potential new uptrend. And right now we don't have that. Oil and gas is popping back into those relative strength screens. We've got some transports that are acting well. But right now, things are pretty much in downtrends. So that's pretty much it from the NASDAQ. We're just basically below a declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA. The trends remain down. That's really been the story for the majority of this year. And we'll just have to see whether we can hold this previous low. That's definitely a key level. And also just going to a weekly chart, we've obviously got this level to the downside, 10,000 as well as a key spot. Yeah, right now we're just in a stage 4 downtrend here, and going over to a monthly, you can see that this really is the most significant correction we've had in quite a while since 2008, as well as the 2000 correction. So moving on to the S&P 500, the story is very similar here. I know some people have been posting this trend line. Who knows if we get down to this level? But once again, this kind of COVID or pre-COVID high is another key spot to watch. And for this to be kind of symmetric, we'd have to kind of base out and move sideways for a bunch more weeks to really, a bunch more months to really start a kind of symmetrical type shape to this base. So right now, just in a downtrend on a weekly chart, stage 4 downtrend. We'll just have to see what happens. And yeah, right now the trend is down on this index as well. Looking at the small caps, let's take a look at the IWM. First things first, this obviously has gotten hit a lot harder. It broke before those other 2 major indexes. We're in a stage 4 downtrend here. And let's go over to a daily chart. This is right at its previous lows. It undercut and rallied here on this day. So once again, this prior low is a significant level. But once again, the trends are down on basically all the time frames on this index, and we were rejected at that declining 21 EMA. Looking at small cap growth in particular, this held above its previous low, so that is something to keep an eye on, that divergence here, and we'll have to see whether we can hold above this prior low as well. And once again, we were rejected at that 21 EMA. Bringing up ARC, you can see this is also just in a downtrend. We've broken below those previous lows. Very negative reversal here on this Friday. And you can just see from the relative strength rating that this has been a very poor performer over the past year or so. Lastly, let's take a look at the FFTY. And once again, this is just in a downtrend. I know I might sound repetitive here, but that's pretty much what these indexes are doing. They're in downtrends, in stage 4s. And we'll just have to look for those names and groups that are acting better than the indexes. And they will be popping up before the overall market does its turn. So stay vigilant, even if it might feel repetitive and useless to keep track of stocks showing relative strength. That process, that routine is going to basically pay off in a huge way once we finally do get a large tradable rally or even the bottom, because you'll be a step ahead and you'll have identified those potential leaders before the market rallies off its lows and has that fall through day. So make sure you're doing your homework and keeping tabs on groups and stocks that are acting well, making new highs before price, making new relative strength highs that are holding above their moving averages, because that work is definitely going to pay off. With that said, let's move on to a few kind of key stocks that I'm watching. First, let's go through the kind of FANG type names. First, taking a look at Tesla, obviously not a FANG stock, but it's one of, it's basically at that level at this point. This is very negative, very sharp downtrend over the past few weeks or so, maybe a little bit oversold looking at where it is with respect to its moving averages, but nevertheless, a very negative chart. You've got kind of double outside bars here. Obviously, this one on Thursday to the upside, then on Friday giving all that back and then some, and we're right at this prior key low. We're actually just undercutting that and going to a higher time frame look at the weekly chart. You can see that we've had a strong prior stage 2 uptrend and now potentially a larger kind of stage 3 distribution phase. And right now we're right at the lows of, this prior base as well as, these key levels. So not a great look from this stock, and we'll have to see whether it can rally. Obviously, we've got earnings in 3 days, so that could really shake things up. And I'd love to see, a gap up, that'd be strong for the bulls. But, there's that saying that surprises occur in the direction of the trend. And right now that trend is down. We are in a stage 4 as we undercut this structure. Moving on to Apple, let's take a look at that chart. Once again, very negative on the weekly. Let's go to a daily chart. Very sharp decline below declining 21 EMA. We're below a declining 50 and 200 SMA. Downside reversal on Friday, but we're holding above this low. So once again, this level is pretty key. This in general has been holding up better than some of these other stocks, but we'll have to see what happens. Definitely a bad look if we undercut this prior low, especially if we challenge this spot right here. Looking at Amazon, let's bring up that chart. You can see it's a little bit worse, below declining 21, 50, 200 SMA, stage 4 here. And we are holding above these lows, which is a good sign, but we'll have to see whether we challenge that and undercut them in the coming weeks, days and weeks. And basically what happens if we do test that level. Moving on to Facebook, let's take a look at Meta. This is just an ugly stage 4 downtrend. Definitely the weakest of those bigger cap names. You can see RS rating is a 13. And we had that huge earnings gap down and really signs of weakness even before that gap down. So nothing really to do with regards to this stock unless you're short. Maybe from this breakdown, this base breakdown, we had that gap down after it retested the 50 SMA from the downside or prior entries right here. But not a great look and definitely a very weak chart. And just going to a weekly chart, actually let's go into a monthly. You can see that this is a very significant trend change since that IPO run, which was so successful, and definitely a changing character of the stock and definitely a negative changing character as well. Moving on to Google, let's take a look at it on the daily chart. Once again, just in a downtrend at this point, holding above this low for the time being. It has undercut this prior low, and we're below declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA. Netflix, although it has gone hammered quite a bit, over the past few months, it's actually been holding up reasonably well. You can see the relative strength line has been increasing. It's still definitely in a stage 4 downtrend, but we do have kind of a key level here worth watching for short-term trade potentially. And even Friday, when a lot of stocks gave back most of their moves, you can see it didn't really give back that much. And we'll just have to see what happens. It is kind of fighting that 50 SMA at this point, but it is showing some constructive action. Maybe we push up, form a little bit of a handle right below this level, and then there's a potential trade into this gap area. But that 200 SMA will be coming down and could act as resistance, so be aware of that as well. But just in general, over the past few months or so, it's acted better than a lot of stocks, and you can see over this period how the overall market's been doing and how Netflix has been doing, and that's why the relative strength line is increasing. And we do have earnings in 2 days, so keep that in mind. Just in general, be aware of any stock that you're looking at, when is its earnings date, and maybe even check a few different sources, because you do not want to be surprised and own shares in a stock that's reporting earnings. If you don't have a cushion, that's just gambling, and that's not good risk management. So with that said, let's move on to a few other stocks that have been holding up well in the healthcare biotech space. REGN has been acting pretty well. We did have this nice earnings gap up. It had an initial move, but that was kind of pushed down by the market, especially on this Friday, but still is holding up really well. right near all-time highs, and so far is definitely showing relative strength. Moving on to Acro, I already showed this, but this is a name that's been acting really well. MYOV is a similar kind of look to it, although this gap up was due to a cancellation of a takeover or some type of news like that. So keep that in mind. You can actually see the news back here. So it's not an earnings gap or announcement or anything like that, but we'll have to see whether it can push from this point. Just going to a weekly chart, we can see some of the other names that are acting well. CPRX, MYOV, I already brought up. This one, it looks like a takeover here. IMUX, big gap up. Let's go over to a daily here. So beautiful move from this HVC, and now we'll see if it can kind of settle it up and tighten right near 10, maybe give an opportunity forming a higher low type setup. Going back to the weekly, I think BLTE, it's another worth watching. Not great recent action, but maybe can base above 22. And some other names, I know some people have been watching this one, HLIT, which isn't in the biotech space, but is acting super strong, trending above those moving averages. So kind of look for those divergences. I know people have been watching AEHR, which if it can base above this level would be awesome. Super strong off these lows, and we'll just have to see what happens. But let me know in the comment section what stocks you're watching as of this moment. And basically, you got to just keep doing your homework, keep doing your screens, and we'll have to see what happens. But a lot of former leaders, CELH, they're in short-term down cycles. You had a failed breakout, short opportunity right here. Then it broke down through this wedge as well as the 50 SMA. And then on Friday, it reconfirmed to the downside. EMPH in the solar space, kind of similar action, failed breakout, failing at the 21 EMA here, in one big bar here, then reconfirmed after a wedging up here into the 50 SMA, bad close on this day, and then broke the 50 SMA and, fell completely apart here. And now we're just, once again, trending down. So FSLR within this space is another one that's kind of on, shaky footing here at the 50 SMA. Not great action recently, and this just looks like it needs a base. So we'll have to see whether it can hold above 120 and this prior low. So with that, that's pretty much it for the stock market outlook video. Let me know your thoughts on the market down below. And if you did enjoy my analysis, please go ahead and leave a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And yeah, best of luck next week. And I'll see you guys in future videos. Take care.